Most lies collapse within days. Mine lasted until the night my ex showed up in the middle of a crime scene and asked why I had a ring on my finger. That was the moment everything spiraled out of control. I wasn't supposed to be here, standing under the flashing blue and red lights of a cop car, pretending to be happily engaged to Officer Evan Carter, my partner, my colleague, and the last person I thought I'd ever call my fiancé. The metal of the fake silver ring pressed into my skin felt heavier than any handcuffs I'd ever carried. It wasn't real. None of it was. But the way Evan's eyes locked onto mine when he slipped it on, that part, God help me, felt too real. We were supposed to be fooling everyone else, not ourselves. It started 3 months ago, in the cramped locker room of the 23rd Precinct, where the smell of stale coffee and gun oil clung to the air. I had just learned that Adam's ex, the man who had left me 2 years ago without even looking back, was being transferred back to our city. And worse, he'd be working with a specialized federal task force station just a few blocks away from us. I knew it was only a matter of time before our paths crossed. I wasn't ready. Evan, ever the practical one, leaned against the lockers, arms crossed, watching me spiral. So, what's the plan? Gonna hide under your desk every time he walks in? Maybe, I muttered, rubbing at my temples. That's when he said it. Joking at first, but the kind of joke that snowballs into a disaster you can't escape from. Or, Evan smirked. We could pretend we're engaged. Nothing keeps an ex at arm's length like a shiny ring and a convincing story. I laughed. I actually laughed. Then, against all better judgment, I said yes. It should have stayed harmless. A simple cover story. But the more we leaned into the lie, the dinners, the casual touches in public, the long stares we faked when anyone was watching, the more the lines blurred. And every night, when I peeled that ring off my finger, I could still feel the phantom weight of Evan's hand holding mine. The lie was supposed to protect me from Adam. Instead, it exposed me to something far more dangerous. The truth about how I felt. The first time Evan and I pretended in front of others, it was at the precinct's Friday night bar meetup. The place was crowded, filled with cops letting off steam after a brutal week. Country music played too loud, beer bottles clinked, and the smell of fried food clung to everything. Adam was there. He walked in like he owned the place, his dark suit a sharp contrast against the worn-out denim and badges around him. My chest tightened at the sight of him, his familiar stride, the way his eyes scanned the room like he was always in control. And then his gaze landed on me. I froze. Evan didn't. He slipped an arm around my waist, smooth as if it had always belonged there, and leaned in just enough for our shoulders to press together. "Smile," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. So I did. I smiled through the storm in my chest, and when Adam's brows lifted in surprise, I felt the first taste of victory. "Didn't think you'd move on so fast," Adam said later, his tone edged with disbelief. "Didn't think you'd care?" I shot back, my voice steadier than my hands. Evan squeezed my hip. Just a small gesture, but it grounded me, saved me. We walked out of that bar that night with Adam's eyes burning holes in our backs. And for the first time since the breakup, I didn't feel like I was drowning. That was the beginning. But here's the thing about lies. They're addictive. Once you get a taste of how easily they protect you, you want more. We started doing it everywhere. At work, where our colleagues teased us about wedding venues and honeymoons. At the diner near the precinct, where the waitress started calling Evan my better half. At home, when Evan dropped me off and lingered just a second too long at my door, like he was waiting for the script to tell him what came next. One night, after a long shift, we sat in his car outside my apartment. The city was quiet for once, the usual sirens replaced by a rare silence. I turned the ring around my finger, the metal catching the glow of the streetlight. "You're getting too good at this," I told him, half joking, half scared. Evan's eyes stayed on the windshield. "Maybe I'm not pretending as much as you think." My breath caught. I wanted to ask what he meant. I wanted to know if the warmth I felt every time he touched me was real, or just another part of our cover. But I didn't, because if I asked, I wasn't sure I could handle the answer. Instead, I said goodnight and went inside, my heart betraying me with every beat. The tension only grew from there. Every laugh lasted too long. Every glance lingered. Every brush of skin sent sparks through me. And yet, I told myself it was all an act. That's what made it dangerous. Because if it wasn't, then I'd have to admit I'd fallen for someone who could break me just as easily as Adam had. And then came the night everything shattered. We were responding to a Cala drug bust gone wrong in a crumbling warehouse on the south side. The air reeked of gasoline and fear, our flashlights slicing through the dark. Shots had already been fired. Backup was slow. My adrenaline spiked, but I had Evan at my back, and that meant I wasn't afraid. Not until the moment I heard that voice. "Daniel!" I spun. Adam stood there, his gun raised, his team storming in from the opposite side. He looked at me like I was still his, like 2 years hadn't passed since the night he walked out. His eyes dropped to my hand, to the ring glinting under the dim light. "What the hell is that?" he demanded. I should have lied again. I should have brushed it off. But before I could speak, Evan stepped forward, his voice steady and sure. "It's exactly what it looks like." And then, without hesitation, he reached for my hand and laced our fingers together. I swear the whole world went still. Adam's jaw clenched. His voice broke with disbelief. "You're engaged?" To him, the lie was never meant to go this far. But in that moment, staring at Evan's unshakable gaze, I realized something terrifying. The lie wasn't a lie anymore. It was the only truth I had left. I didn't sleep that night. After the bust, after Adam's eyes burned through me like he could see every truth I'd buried, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my apartment. The ring still clung to my finger. I hadn't taken it off. I told myself it was because I was too tired, too distracted. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't want to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's face in that warehouse. The way he stepped forward without hesitation. His voice like steel. His hand reaching for mine as if we'd been doing this for years. That wasn't just acting. That was something else. Something more dangerous than the bullets flying around us. By morning, I had convinced myself to bury it. Ignore it. Pretend nothing had changed. But when I walked into the precinct, Evan was already there. He was leaning against his desk, files spread out in front of him, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked up when I walked in, and his lips curved into that small, restrained smile that always made my stomach flip. "Morning," he said. I swallowed. Morning. The air between us was thick with something unsaid. I sat down, trying to focus on the paperwork in front of me, but my mind kept replaying the way his fingers had laced with mine. I could still feel the phantom warmth. "You okay?" he asked after a moment. "Fine." My voice came out too sharp, too defensive. Evan didn't push. He never did. But the way his eyes lingered on me said everything. Later that week, the precinct buzzed with rumors. Word of our so-called engagement had spread faster than I expected. Maybe Adam had said something. Maybe people just picked up on the way we acted around each other. "Congratulations, lovebirds." Officer Jenkins clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me nearly drop my coffee. "When's the big day?" I forced a laugh. "We're still figuring that out." Evan, ever smooth, slid in beside me. "He wants a beach wedding. I keep telling him we'll melt in the sun." Laughter erupted around us, and just like that, the attention shifted away. But my heart thudded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. A beach wedding. He'd said it so casually, so naturally, like he'd thought about it, like he could see it. And the terrifying part? So could I. The more the lie grew, the harder it was to keep it straight. People expected details: where we'd met, how he proposed, what kind of wedding we wanted. First, it was easy to spin stories. But the more we created, the more they started to feel like memories instead of fabrications. Like the night we told the precinct how he proposed. We were sitting at the bar again, coworkers crowded around, waiting for a story. I froze, panic clawing at me, but Evan picked it up effortlessly. "It was after a long shift," he said, his voice warm, steady. "We stopped at that diner on 8th, the one with the terrible pancakes he secretly loves. He was tired, grumpy, wouldn't stop complaining about his coffee being too weak. Laughter rippled through the group. I opened my mouth to correct him, but then he added, and right there, in the middle of his rambling, I pulled out the ring. He almost spit out his food. The table roared with laughter. My face heated, not because it was funny, but because the way he said it so detailed, so tender made it feel real. Like maybe, if he ever did propose, that's exactly how it would happen. When the night ended, and we walked out into the cool air, I turned to him. "You're getting too good at this," I whispered. He looked at me, his eyes serious. "I'm not acting, Daniel." My breath caught. The streetlight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the softness in his gaze. I wanted to ask what he meant. I wanted to reach out, to close the space between us. But the words tangled in my throat. So I said nothing. And that silence haunted me more than anything. Adam wasn't silent. A week later, he cornered me in the parking lot. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, puddles glistening under the streetlights. "You think I'm stupid?" he hissed, stepping closer. His eyes were sharp, his voice low. "You and Carter? That's a joke. You don't even look at him the way you looked at me." My fists clenched. "You don't get to talk about the way I look at anyone. You lost that right when you walked away." His jaw tightened. "You're lying to yourself. And I know it. I can see it." The truth in his words stung. But before I could answer, Evan appeared, his presence solid, grounding. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Adam's gaze flicked between us, his mouth twisting into something bitter. "Yeah, the problem is lies always catch up to you." Then he walked away, leaving me shaken, Evan's hand hovering just inches from mine. "Don't listen to him," Evan said softly. But how could I not? When the one person I wanted to believe in was the same one I was supposed to be lying to. The days blurred after that. Shifts, paperwork, late nights, stolen moments that weren't supposed to mean anything but meant everything. One night, after a particularly brutal call, we ended up at my apartment. We didn't talk much. Just sat on the couch, both exhausted, the TV flickering in the background. At some point, I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, my head was on Evan's shoulder, his arm resting along the back of the couch. I should have moved. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes again, letting myself pretend just for a little while that it was real, that I was allowed to want this, to want him. When I woke the next morning, he was gone. But the blanket draped over me told me everything I needed to know. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. The precinct was hosting its annual charity gala, a black tie event filled with donors, politicians, and more small talk than I could stand. I hated those nights. But this year I wasn't going alone. Evan picked me up in a suit that fit him too well, his tie slightly loosened, his smile easy. I wore the ring, polished to a shine, my nerves buzzing. "You look good," he said as we walked into the ballroom, his hand brushing mine. "So do you?" I managed, my throat dry. The night was a blur of music, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. We played our roles perfectly, smiling, touching, whispering like we were really in love. And maybe in that moment we were. Then I saw Adam. He was across the room, his eyes locked on me, his expression unreadable. He started toward us, determination in every step. Before I could panic, Evan leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "Trust me." And then, in front of the entire room, he kissed me. It wasn't a quick peck or a staged act. It was deep, real, electric. The kind of kiss that strips you bare, that makes the world disappear. My hands clutched his suit, my body responding before my brain could catch up. When he pulled back, my heart was racing, my lips tingling. Adam's face was pale with shock, anger simmering beneath the surface. But I didn't care, because for the first time, the lie felt more like the truth than anything I'd ever known. The kiss changed everything. In that glittering ballroom, with the strings of violins humming and the chatter of uniforms and donors swirling around us, I forgot the rules. I forgot the script. All I felt was the heat of Evan's lips and the steadiness of his hand pressed against the small of my back. For a second, the lie slipped away, and what remained was raw, undeniable truth. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine like he was asking me something wordless, something too dangerous to say out loud. And I wanted to answer. God, I wanted to tell him yes. But then Adam's voice cut through the haze. Unbelievable. We both turned. Adam stood a few feet away, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. The tension in his body was visible, a storm threatening to break. Around us, the crowd was too busy laughing and drinking to notice, but I saw it. The way his eyes darted between me and Evan, the fury barely contained. I stepped back instinctively, my body torn between two truths, one past, one present. Adam, I began, but he shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Of all people, Daniel. Him? You think this is real? The words stung more than they should have. Maybe because part of me still feared he was right. Evan didn't flinch. He stood tall, his hand brushing mine as if to remind me he was there. It doesn't matter what you think, he said evenly. It matters what we know. Adam's eyes narrowed. And what do you know, Carter? That you can play house with him? Pretend to be his savior? He's not yours. He'll never be yours. The ballroom noise swelled, but all I heard was the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to scream at Adam, to tell him he didn't know me anymore, that he didn't have the right. But before I could, Evan stepped closer to him, his voice low but steady. You had your chance. You blew it. Don't punish him for finally moving on. For a heartbeat, I thought Adam might hit him. His jaw flexed, his fists trembled. But instead, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving me shaking, Evan's hand barely keeping me steady. We didn't talk about the kiss that night. In the car ride back, silence filled the space between us. My fingers fidgeted with the ring, my chest aching with words I couldn't say. Evan kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel too hard. When he pulled up in front of my apartment, I opened the door, hesitated, and turned to him. Evan. He finally looked at me, his gaze softer than I expected. You don't have to explain. Not yet. Not yet, I echoed, my voice cracking. He nodded once, a faint smile tugging at his lips. When you're ready, I'll be here. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold onto that promise. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, doubt clawed at me. Was this still just a game we had let go too far? Or had the game become real without us realizing? The fallout from the gala came quickly. Whispers spread through the precinct like wildfire. Some congratulated us, others teased. But a few looked at me with eyes that lingered too long, questions hiding behind their stares. Being openly gay in the department wasn't unheard of, but it wasn't simple either. And now, our so-called engagement wasn't just a rumor, it was a headline. Better get used to it, Evan said one morning, sliding a cup of coffee onto my desk. They're going to be watching us for a while. I sighed, rubbing at my temples. You say that like it doesn't bother you. He leaned against the edge of my desk, his smirk softer than usual. Because it doesn't. Let them watch. I'm not ashamed. The words hit me harder than they should have. Not ashamed. I wished I could say the same with that kind of certainty. Adam didn't stay quiet. A week later, he cornered me again, this time in a diner of all places. I'd gone there after a long shift, hoping for greasy food and a moment of peace. But when I looked up from my plate of fries, there he was, sliding into the booth across from me without asking. We need to talk, he said. I dropped my fork, irritation flaring. No, we don't. His eyes softened in a way that made my chest ache despite myself. Daniel, I know you better than anyone. And I know this thing with Carter, it's not you. You don't look at him the way you used to look at me. I laughed bitterly. You mean the way I looked at you before you broke me? His expression faltered, guilt flashing across his features. I made a mistake. No, I snapped, leaning forward. A mistake is forgetting to call, walking away without a word, leaving me wondering what the hell I did wrong. That's not a mistake. That's cruelty. Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then he whispered, I still love you. The words hit like a sucker punch. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and for a split second, I was back in the past, the nights tangled in sheets, the mornings filled with laughter. But just as quickly, the memory soured, replaced by the image of him walking away. You don't get to say that now, I said quietly, my voice shaking. He reached across the table, his hand brushing mine, but I pulled away like his touch burned. You think Carter loves you? He asked, desperation leaking into his tone. He doesn't. Not the way I did. I stood, throwing bills onto the table, my hands trembling. Maybe not, but he stayed. And that's more than you ever did. I walked out before he could answer, my heart pounding, my vision blurring with unshed tears. That night I told Evan everything. We sat on my couch, the city lights spilling through the window, casting shadows across his face. I told him about Adam, about the pain, about the way I still carried pieces of that broken relationship inside me. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted, my voice raw. Half the time I can't tell if this is still just a lie, or if it's something else. And that scares me more than anything. Evan listened, silent, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he reached out, his hand covering mine with a warmth that steadied me. It doesn't scare me, he said simply. I looked at him, my throat tight. Why not? Because I know what I feel, he said, his voice steady. And I don't need you to have it all figured out right now. I just need you to trust me. Trust. The word echoed in my head, heavier than the ring on my finger. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. So I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself lean into him, let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a lie anymore. But the world wasn't done testing us. 2 weeks later, everything came crashing down. We were called to testify in court for a major case we'd worked on together. The room was packed, lawyers, reporters, even some of our colleagues. I was nervous, but I thought I could handle it. Until Adam walked in, part of the federal team called as a witness. He smirked when he saw me, like he knew something I didn't. And then, in the middle of cross-examination, it happened. The opposing lawyer pulled out a piece of evidence. A photo of me and Evan, standing too close outside the precinct, his hand brushing mine, the ring glinting in the sun. Officer Daniels, the lawyer said, her voice sharp. Would you care to explain the nature of your relationship with your partner, Officer Carter? The courtroom buzzed with whispers. My chest tightened, my palms slick with sweat. This was it. The moment the lie would unravel. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Then Evan spoke, his voice calm, unwavering. He's my fiancé, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And I won't apologize for it. The room exploded, murmurs, gasps, stares. But all I saw was him, standing there like a shield, like he wasn't afraid of the fallout. And for the first time, I believed him. I believed us. The silence stretched unbearably, broken only by the muffled sounds of laughter from down the hall where other students were still awake. But here, in this narrow corridor, time had curled in on itself, drawing all its focus on us two boys caught between the need to run and the desire to stay. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, but nothing came. My chest felt too tight. My vision blurred with tears that refused to fall, hanging like stubborn confessions at the edge of my lashes. He looked at me, his hand still on the doorknob, his knuckles white as if letting go meant surrendering something he wasn't ready to name. Why are you here? He whispered finally. His voice wasn't harsh, wasn't cold, it trembled, the kind of tremor that betrayed a storm inside. My throat ached. I didn't mean to bother you. I wanted to stay, just a little longer, just until what? His tone cut through me, sharp but cracking in the middle like glass breaking under pressure. His eyes glistened in the dim light. Until you hurt yourself more? Until you convince yourself you don't matter. The words slammed into me harder than any blow. I took a step back, clutching my books against my chest like a shield. But even in my shame, even in the urge to disappear, I couldn't lie. My voice came out broken but true. Until you noticed me. The silence after that was unbearable. My heart pounded against my ribs, begging me to run, begging me to flee the humiliation of what I had just confessed. I shifted my weight, ready to bolt down the hall. But then his hand left the doorknob and reached out, hesitant, trembling. He caught my wrist before I could move. The warmth of his touch spread like fire through my veins, anchoring me. "Do you think I haven't noticed?" His voice cracked. He pulled me closer, and for the first time, I saw not the professor who intimidated me, not the untouchable figure I admired from afar, but a man fragile, conflicted, afraid. Every time you sat in the back of class, every time you stayed late in the library, every time you looked away when our eyes almost met, I noticed. My lips parted in disbelief. You did." He nodded, his jaw tight as though fighting words that wanted to spill. I told myself it was wrong, that I shouldn't feel this. But you're here, and I can't keep pretending anymore. Tears blurred my vision. I wanted to speak, to tell him how long I had carried this secret, how many nights I had clung to the fantasy of being seen, of being wanted. But before I could, he pulled me into his arms. And I broke. The sobs came out raw, guttural, everything I had held back spilling into the fabric of his shirt. His embrace tightened, holding me together when I was unraveling. His hand pressed gently against the back of my head, his chin resting in my hair. "You're not invisible," he whispered fiercely, as though daring the world to deny it. "Not to me. Never to me." I clung to him, my books sliding to the floor with a soft thud. Forgotten. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself believe. Believe that maybe my heart hadn't been foolish, that maybe my love wasn't destined to be a wound I carried alone. He pulled back slightly, just enough to cup my face in his hands. His thumbs brushed my damp cheeks, his gaze searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "I shouldn't," he murmured. "But God, I want to." And then, as though every barrier we had both built collapsed in the same moment, his lips met mine. It wasn't gentle, not at first. It was desperate, years of silence and restraint combusting into fire. His mouth moved against mine with hunger, with fear, with relief, with everything we hadn't dared to say. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my fingers gripping his shirt as though I might disappear if I let go. When we finally broke apart, gasping, our foreheads pressed together, both of us trembling, I knew nothing would ever be the same. "I love you," I whispered, terrified and liberated all at once. His eyes widened, glistened, then softened with something I had only ever dreamed of seeing directed at me. "You think I don't?" His voice shook. "You think I haven't been fighting this every day? I love you, and I'm done pretending I don't." The confession hung between us like lightning, dangerous but electrifying, illuminating everything we had hidden. And in that moment, the world outside the rules, the risks, the judgments faded. All that remained was us. He kissed me again, softer this time, tender, a promise in the brush of his lips. I felt myself melting into it, into him, into a future I hadn't dared to imagine. For once, I wasn't the nondescript student fading into the background. I wasn't the boy who stayed late in the library to be near someone who would never know his name. I was his, and he was mine. The door behind him remained open, golden light spilling into the hallway. And as he drew me inside, shutting out the rest of the world, I realized that the moment I had feared most, the moment of exposure, of being seen, had become the moment I would treasure forever. Because I stayed. Because he opened the door. Because when our eyes met, we didn't look away. And that changed everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.